So good evening, everyone. Regulars and guests, you're all very welcome this evening. This is the session number 37, and this week it's all about the Ringing Recovery Toolbox. I'm delighted to introduce our two guests this evening. So we have Lesley Belcher and David Sparling. So Lesley is the chair of the Association of Ringing Teachers, lives in Buckinghamshire. But has got very local connections to us as well. So her mum, Jill Belcher, rings at El Shilton, which we all know. And David lives and rings in Essex. And it's good to see you both. Thank you so much. By the wonders of technology, you don't have to travel anywhere in order to be with us, which is you know, one of the pluses, I guess. And, you know, maybe we wouldn't have done this under normal circumstances, but, you know, well, there you go. But on behalf of the Leicester Diocesan Guild, thank you so much indeed for your time and effort in speaking to us this evening. So I'll hand over to you, Lesley and David, to take us through it. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. So David, are you going to put up the first slides?
How's that?
Yeah, that's cool.
Yes. Okay, so first of all, thanks very much for inviting us to talk to you today. Mark was a little bit general in what he asked us to speak about. He said anything about art or ringing recovery. So in the end, we decided to talk about both tonight, perhaps with a slight slant towards what the long layoff might mean for ringing, and some ideas that we have with the Central Council about the ringing recovery. Next slide. Thank you. So there's a certain person in the middle there at the back you might recognise. So anyway, the story that we're going to tell today, we're going to start at the art conference in March last year, which actually turned out to be the last big ringing event before lockdown. I think probably the first few months, which do seem a long time ago now, I think we all tried to take advantage of the break to rest, do some DIY and gardening. And although we were nervous about COVID, I think there was because of spring, there was a good spirit about the place. But I think eventually we came to realise that this wasn't going to be over in a few months. On my part, I thought that October would be when we were coming back to ringing. And because of this extra long delay, I think people began to be thinking about the impact of such a long layoff on ringing. I think we've all found ways to support ringers during lockdown, and obviously something that you've been doing is through activities like these webinars, and I was very surprised to hear this was the 37th in the series. But I think now we've actually entered quite a difficult phase. I'm sort of reading in the news about something called pandemic fatigue, which I think it expresses itself in different ways with different people, but it can lead to a loss of drive. In my particular instance, although I'm still working quite hard, it's leading to a certain loss of creativity. And in some, unfortunately, it's the feeling of not being able to cope. But ringing will resume. And we want to make it recover as well as it can. And in order to do that, we need to continue. We need to continue what we've been doing up till now in terms of keeping people involved and feeling part of the ringing community. Plus, we've got to start thinking about how to rebuild ringing when some sort of normality eventually returns. And that's something that we have been doing in partnership with the Central Council. But let's start now with introductions before we get into the meat of this. So if you don't know me, I'm Lesley Belcher, and I have been chair of art now for almost 2 years. I learnt to ring when I was around 10. I was taught by my grandfather at Thurleston, who, when the time was right for me, took me ringing at both Earl Shilton and Sapcote, where I learnt under the rather severe tutelage sometimes, but really good tutelage of George Newton and Michael Brown. I think I got really passionate about ringing when I moved to London and I became ringing master of the University of London Society. And at the same time, I learnt how to ring handbells and really started ringing peals. In my early 30s, I moved to France, and the arrival of children turned me into a lapsed ringer for almost 20 years, although Michael Angrave, I think, organised 3/4 peals for me in that time for various to celebrate various family events. I returned to ringing about 8 years ago and got swept into art out of curiosity, to be honest. And once I saw what it did, I was an immediate convert, and the rest is history, as they say. So over to David.
Yes, well, good evening. My name's David Sparling, and I'm largely unknown, I'm pleased to say. My ringing career followed a similar path to Lesley in many ways. I learnt when I was 10, along with my twin brother, and I learnt to ring in a nice little village of Kirkby-le-Soken, right up in the northeast corner of Essex. In fact, we're closer to Suffolk than we are Essex in many ways. And it's a very snowy northeast corner of Essex, I have to say. So as Mark said, it's just as well that we're doing this by Zoom and not trying to get anywhere tonight. Like Lesley, as a student, I went to London, had a wonderful 3 years at Imperial College. Someone was talking about Imperial College a little while ago, where I met one Roger Bailey, who many of you may know. I was one of many people that Roger taught to ring handbells. I'd not touched handbells until that time. And he also, along with the rest of the UL, introduced me to 12 bell ringing. When I came back from London to Essex, I wanted to carry on ringing 12, but not having any near here. I went across the border and started to ring at St Mary Le Tower, Ipswich, where, of course, I came under the wing of George Pipe, who I'm sure many of you know, and he ended up being a great mentor and a great friend of mine. I'm a past master of the Essex Association. I'm a one-time Central Council rep, and I'm now a life vice president. I got involved in art in 2016, even though I had been a ringing teacher, well, most of my life actually, and I had been a tutor on the Essex course ever since it started. I thought I'd go along and see what it was all about. And actually, I thought it had got some really good ideas. So I'm quite a new boy as well. I think the thing I would say is that none of the above, either in Lesley's history or mine, gives us any kind of qualification for predicting the future of ringing. So this talk is about some of the things that have been going on, which you may know about, but maybe not, as well as a collection of thoughts and ideas about what the landscape post-pandemic might look like, and most importantly of all, how on earth we're going to cope after a year out of the saddle. Hopefully it will prompt some discussion and maybe even engender some enthusiasm to get involved. So, as Lesley said in the introduction, the story starts way back in March 2020 at the art conference. And I know this is the dim and distant past now, but really it wasn't all that long ago, nearly a year ago. The conference, 14th, 15th of March, came after the most successful year in arts history. We had run 64 M1 or M2 teaching courses. That's more than one a week. We'd had 569 people attend those courses. We'd had 170 teacher accreditations, 1,191 learning the ropes certificates had been issued in the previous year, 41 of them at the top level 5. We'd sold over £14,000 worth of books DVDs, pamphlets and goodies in the past year. We'd had 120 people crammed into Hilton Village Hall for 2 days. Remember when you could have 120 people in the same room and no one batted an eyelid? We all shared biscuits and used the same spoon to stir our tea. We won't be doing that again for a little while. But the conference was an excellent couple of days. It was very much focused on striking. We had some excellent presentations by Richard Grimmett, who'd led the Birmingham 12 Bell Band for all those years, and Colin Newman, and both of them had referenced the need for solid foundation skills to be able to develop ringing to the level that they had achieved, certainly in Birmingham. The conference was also very closely aligned to the Central Council strategy of not having any barriers to progress and to give lots of different options for people to move forward. In summary, you know, it presented ART as a really successful delivery organisation. We're engaged with the wider ringing community. It was all running smoothly. The people there were enthused, fired up, and we all went home, and in the space of a few days, everything came to a grinding halt. We had planned courses where people had signed up and paid that we had to cancel. And we went from this, where it was heaving and buzzing and exciting, to this, where the tumbleweed blew across everybody's diaries. And mine went from chock-a-block to empty in no more than 24 hours. Everything just got cancelled. So those early stages of lockdown, when it all came to a very fast grinding halt, gave, I think, all of us, but certainly ART, a chance to reflect. The first thing that goes through your mind when all of that happens is, can you survive? And it's a really, really important question. And very quickly, we were very pleased to work out that, yes, indeed, we could. We had financial stability, we had financial resources behind us, and we had prudent housekeeping, which meant that actually the finances were not a problem. And that takes a whole heap of concern away. And what it did do for us is give us a time to address overdue jobs. So just like all of us as individuals, you know, set about tidying up the garden, painting the shed, clearing out the greenhouse, all of those jobs that certainly I had put off for years and told my wife that I certainly didn't have time to do. I now had to do because there was nothing else to do. And for ART, we had the same opportunity. We had grown very quickly, and some of our systems and processes were creaking. They worked because we had a number of volunteers working lots of hours and working very hard to make them work. But what it gave us a chance to do is tidy the greenhouse, and we redesigned and rebuilt Smart Ringer, for example, our main resource centre. We revamped our financial systems, and in fact, we've just had the first set of financial reports delivered out of our new financial package. Much clearer information with a fraction of the time invested to generate it. So that's been a great investment of our time. We revamped websites, and we revisited and revamped many of our resources. So our main teaching resources, M2F and M2C teaching courses, we have reworked while we've been in lockdown, and now we're itching to get out there and have a go at putting them in. In the wider world, during that period, people also fairly relaxed, as Lesley said in the introduction. there were social gatherings. We learned all this wonderful new technology like Zoom that we're now all experts on. We jump on Zoom calls without really batting an eyelid, whereas March last year, I certainly had never heard of it. We've had quiz nights. And interestingly, by the end of March, this wonderful facility of ringing room had appeared and people were ringing quarters on it. If you think about that, 400 years of ringing history with no online ability to do any ringing, and within 2 to 3 weeks of lockdown, someone had come up with a system which is now, frankly, a global phenomenon. However, it is fair to say, as Lesley again touched on in the introduction, that as time went by and we realised that this was not going to be a quick event, the impact of the pandemic really started to bite. And it's sort of characterised, as it says on the screen there, with a loss of routine. I, for one, struggle to know what day of the week it is, because I don't have practice night on Wednesday and I'm not getting up to go and ring for Sunday service on Sunday. And one day merges very much with another. We miss our Wednesday morning peel bands, and in particularly, we miss our Wednesday lunchtimes in the pub. All of that routine has gone. People have missed out on friendship, the chance just to get together in groups, be it in the pub after ringing or at the different practices that we go to, and the chance for the banter and the shared experiences has all gone. The opportunity just to travel, the opportunity to drop in on somebody's practice unannounced and be sure of a warm welcome has all gone. And again, really quite importantly, the physical activity has gone. We don't climb stairs, we don't pull bells up, we're not ducking under the low door to get into the tower and all that kind of thing. And if you think about ringing, if you were a ringer that rang perhaps 3 times a week on a Sunday and perhaps a couple of practices, and you ring 5 120s in those 3 practices, that's 3,000 repetitions of stretching up and down and elbows bending and shoulders flexing, 3,000 repetitions a week. And we've gone from that to nothing. If you're an avid peel ringer, like one of my mates who on average has rung 150 peels a year for the last 20 years, that's 15,000 repetitions a week that you're no longer doing. And any of you who have had the chance to catch hold of a bell in the odd times we've been allowed to may well have noticed that it was a lot harder work than it was back in March last year. So all of those things have started to bite, and it certainly became much more noticeable when the second lockdown struck. There'd just been that gradual return. We were allowed to ring 3 or 4 bells for odd occasions, but it was something, and people thought that that might be the light at the end of the tunnel. And then all of a sudden that light went out, and now we're in the middle of a winter. We've got snow on the ground. It's cold, it's dark. It's certainly not the weather to get out on your bike or carrying on in the garden. And there's been a number of posts on social media reflecting the degree to which people are struggling. So part of what we wanted to talk about are the things that are going on during the pandemic, and what art have done during that time and are continuing to do. And I guess one of the important parts of that is to recognise that actually we don't see that our role has changed. It has always been about teaching and encouraging and sharing and motivating, and that remains the case, even though we can't do it in the ways that we used to. We've had to find new ways of maintaining momentum. One of the really important things that we did, and to be fair, it had started before this madness came in, but it was hugely accelerated as lockdown started to bite. And that is that we released access to many of our resources. So prior to lockdown, most of ART's resources were available only to ART members, but we've made just about all of them now available to all. We released and revamped a recruitment and retention toolkit, and that was picked up by the Central Council V&L work group and used as the base for their own workshop. We completely revamped the simulator toolkit. So there's information in there on building simulators, but perhaps for most of us, more importantly, setting them up and how to use them. There's method toolkits, Plain Bob and Grancer, but we introduced a whole load of new minimus methods. So when the first easing of lockdown came in and we were allowed to go back and ring a low number of bells, there were a whole load of new minimus methods for people to have a go at if they could only ring 4 in an 8-bell tower, for example. We reworked the learning the ropes handbell resources, and handbells has been, I was going to say unexpected, maybe it isn't unexpected, but it has been a real beneficiary from the lockdown. There has been a resurgence in handbell ringing throughout the summer. It was the last bit of ringing to get stopped, because even with smaller numbers, you could still meet in a handbell group. You could meet outside, and during the summer, it was really quite pleasant ringing handbells outside. Less so now, I have to say, but it's really taken off. You can practice on Able and all the other simulators. You can ring handbells in Ringing Room and Handbell Stadium and Ding and the rest of it. So it has really taken off. And with the emergence of the e-bells, it provides a near real life experience in a virtual platform. 138 e-bells were ordered on the day that their release was announced. 138 within an hour and a half, because I was after that hour and a half and I had to sit on the waiting list. Over 400 now have been sold, and they've been shipped to Australia, USA, mainland Europe. A real great take up, and you know, real thanks should be due to those people that did that. Alongside all of those, there's been a whole load of new resources that ART have put together during the pandemic. Some of you may have seen them, so excuse the duplication, but others may not. One of the first things we did is to create a COVID support page, and you'll find that on the standard ART website under resources, and you'll see it there, COVID ringing support. Incidentally, all the other stuff I've just talked about, handbells, recruitment, retention, simulator, and so on, they're all under that resources section there. Just click on them and have a look in your spare time. But that support page is really a page of links. It's got information on virtual platforms, on things that are going on, tips for handbells, all kinds of stuff. I've only got a fraction of the page here on this screenshot, but it's well worth dipping in and having a look and just seeing what is going on. We enhanced our YouTube channel. We always had a YouTube channel, but we've put an awful lot more information on that since it started. So there's a little screenshot of this. As you would expect, there's a whole load of information on the YouTube channel about what ART does. But in addition to that, there's videos on using Able and Virtual Belfry simulators with nice little snippets for all those things that you never could quite work out how to do. Some easy guides to getting stuck in with that. Whole series on handbells again, run by Tom Hinks. there are recordings from older art conferences, as well as this year's one, with all the keynote speakers that are worth dipping into. There's a little video on introducing you to Ringing Room, and there's even one on how to use Zoom, which of course none of you will need, because you wouldn't be listening to this if you did. However, it is worth going and having a look at all the things that are there. We created a completely new online learning portal. And that learning portal has a range of goodies, such as Plain Hunt and understanding call changes. But it's got some items on there for the more experienced: composition and calling touches of splice by none other than the president of the Central Council. And there's new things being added to that all the time. There's also wider subjects, such as simple maintenance and rope splicing, a series on videos of things to look out for before we go back up into the tower. You know, not going to turn you into a professional bell hanger, but things that you ought to be checking before we start to ring the bells again after such a long time. The art shop reopened. We had to close that when COVID first hit, but we revamped our processes and managed to get that going, being able to collect the orders and dispatch them in a safe way. Going back to that online learning portal, there's a couple of specific things in there. There's a new 50 virtual ringing things. So 50 virtual ringing things is a set of challenges that you can do at home, online, on your own. So completely COVID safe, completely organized to keep Boris and the rest happy. No need to break any rules or even bend them. And it's akin to the 50 ringing things that existed before. And there's 85 or so people signed up to do that. It's all self-policed, it's all self-marked. So, you know, you can cheat and you can tick them all off if you want, but that's not really the point, is it? But it's just some ideas of some things to do when it's cold and dark and we don't want to go out. And as part of that, there's minor stepping stones, which is akin to the Ringing World pathways. It's a series of graduated steps from Plain Hunt up to Surprise Minor. I can tell you there's been a huge debate about what methods should be included and indeed in what order. And I'm sure if you look at them, you'll have your own ideas. But the idea is to introduce new concepts in ringing, not just a blue line learning exercise, but to introduce the ideas about place notation and lead ends and work above and below the treble and how they fit together, observing what the treble's doing at whatever time. So all of these methods are designed to introduce one of those new concepts and give people something to think about, which of course you can do virtually even before we get back in the tower. And last on that page, we've set up a series of Ringing Room workshops to introduce those that are less inclined to ring online to Ringing Room, and to offer some tips and ideas on how you might use Ringing Room for a virtual practice. And I know it's not for everyone, but an awful lot of people have spent an awful lot of time on Ringing Room. And if you're interested in those, there's information on how to sign up for them on the ART website. Outside of art, of course, there has been a whole load of other things going on. I think I've just jumped over a slide. Have I missed a slide? Oh, no, I'm okay. So I talked about the effect of the second lockdown before, and one of the things that many of you may have seen when that happened was there was a flurry of activity on social media with people asking what was going on and what was going to happen. And what that did is it triggered a joint initiative between ART and the Central Council, and we set up a survival and recovery steering group, which Lesley and I are both part of, along with key members of the Central Council, including President and Vice President and leader of the volunteering work groups. The focus of that steering group is threefold. First and foremost, it's to try and maintain motivation over winter, to, if you like, find a path through the trees to whenever we might come out of this. And I am, and I'm very much reminded of Sir Ranulph Fiennes' comments when he climbed Everest. So Sir Ranulph Fiennes, the great British explorer, the oldest man, a British man ever to climb Everest, succeeded on his third attempt. And on one of his failed attempts, he analysed why he hadn't made it. And one of the problems, he said, was that he was focused too much on the summit and how far there was still to go. And he would see what he thought was the summit in front of him, and he'd work his way to it, only to find when he finally got there that it wasn't the summit at all. There was a col behind it and an even bigger, steeper hill behind it. And he found that demoralizing. On his third and final trip, he adopted the mantra, trudge forever. Trudge forever. All you have to do is worry about getting the next foot in front of this one. And then you do it again. And then you do it again. And you focus on the here and now and not on the how far there is to go. And actually, I think that's the secret for getting through the current situation. We focus for now on the here and now and how can we keep ourselves going. In parallel, we are busily preparing plans for recovery, and Lesley will talk about those in a moment. You know, the one thing we do not want to happen is for the shackles to be taken off and then everyone to look around saying, oh, what should we do now? We want a plan. Oven-ready plan, I think, is the phrase that's been used in the past. We want an oven-ready plan that we can put into practice as and when we're allowed. And this steering group is formed and very active. We meet every couple of weeks. We have a whole list of things that we're working on. We have a whole list of people that have volunteered to do that. As I say, Lesley will talk much more about that. The third strand of what this steering group is about is ongoing communications. And we see the communications being absolutely key with people at grassroots. And Lesley will talk more about that as well. But hopefully you will have seen some of the newsletters that have come out already, and more to come. So keep your eyes on that. Driven partly by ideas that have come out of that, here's just a last few things that you may not know about, perhaps you do, but are ideas as part of that survival to help us trudge forever. The most useful one, I think, is the new Bellboard COVID hub. So Bellboard, the standard Bellboard, the one that we always go to see our peels and quarter peels, or used to, you'll see on the left-hand side as a new entry, which is virtual hub. And it is the go-to reference for everything that's going on. We are encouraging guilds, associations, individuals to post on there anything that is happening in their world that are open to other people. There are videos put on there, there's news stories put on there, but most importantly, there's a diary to show people what's going on. I talked about the newsletters before, one in December, one in January. There's another one due out any day now and they're sent out via associations and guilds, but also via social media channels for art and Central Council. They'll be on the art website, they'll be on the Central Council website. You have to go hard to miss them, so keep your eyes out for those. Simon Linford has picked up one of the strands that they talked about in the Central Council about the cast of 1,000. This was getting 1,000 experienced ringers prepared to give up a bit of their time to help emerging ringers take that leap from the blue zone to the red zone, as he called it, to get up into perhaps surprise major ringing where there might not be a critical mass in their area. So the idea was to get people that would volunteer their time to go to a special practice to help people get on. Well, we can't have those special practices in real life. So they have been organised online in Ringing Room, and the initial trial ones run over the last month or so have been very successful. They are targeted practices for specific people with specific bands that are matched up. It's not a free-for-all. People expected to do their homework and turn up, and they've been a very, very well received addition to the main use of Ringing Room, which was rounds and call changes, foundation skills, and up to minor and maybe a few methods. And it fills that gap in the middle because there'd been peals of 23 spliced, all the work run on Ringing Room, but not much in that middle ground. The survival toolkit I won't talk too much about because Lesley will lead on to that when she talks about the toolkit. But there are a series of resources that have been published to keep people amused. And finally, we are actively encouraging social events like this. And of course, I realise I'm preaching to the choir here, given that this is your 37th such event. It's a bit late to encourage the Leicester Diocesan Guild to get its act together on webinars, isn't it? But we are trying to do that across the country for those who, in all seriousness, have been much less engaged. And big up to all you guys for what you've done on that and keeping people together. And it's very much part of our strategy. And as well as webinars, we, as and when the time's right, we're encouraging people to do non-ringing things just to keep people together, whether it's a few people getting together for coffee, whether it's going on a socially distanced ramble. We've had virtual cheese and wine evenings. The college youths, not that I am a college youth, I'm of the other ilk, but they had a very successful dinner by Zoom, for example. So there's lots of things that we can do. And in order to get us to trudge forever, we need to keep a stream of those available. But that's probably enough from me. And I will hand over to Lesley, who will talk about what we do as and when all of this is over. Lesley, the floor is yours.
Thank you, David. So I thought we might actually start by trying to think about the likely impact of COVID on ringing. And this is our best guess. I mean, unfortunately, the crystal ball that's under my bed is very, very cloudy and not giving me any clues at the moment. But what we do know is that we are unfortunately going to lose some ringers. And I expect that they're probably going to be concentrated at the ends of the experience curve. Some older ringers will have lost the physical conditioning of ringing regularly every week, and looking at the calculations that David's already mentioned, and they just actually, because of that lack of continuity, they unfortunately won't be able to return. I also expect that we're going to lose some of our newer recruits, some of whom actually might be quite relieved that they're no longer ringing. They've drifted away, they found other hobbies, and they just to be honest, won't want to return. On top of that, we should expect that some ringers will actually do less than they return. I've been amazed talking to people over the past 6 or 9 months, the number of peel ringers, and I'm not thinking of the 150 peels a year, but more like the 30 to 60 peels type people who said, now I've stopped, I really, really don't know why I did that. And when I go back, I'm not going to ring any more peels unless it's for a real special occasion. And I think we'll also come across experienced ringers, people who were real stalwarts in the tower, who say that they want a better balance when they go back. They found other things to do. They found a quieter pace of life. And they want to continue with his new activities when ringing resumes. So they'll be there, they'll be ringing, but perhaps not at the frequency that they were doing before. And I expect that there are going to be teachers out there as well, ringing teachers, who might be demotivated when they see years of hard work disappearing if learners don't return. On top of that, some towers might unfortunately fall silent, either because there's not enough ringers to sustain the band, or in the medium term because of church closures or reduced services. Others won't be able to support method ringing anymore, which could lead in the fullness of time to ringers just drifting away, because that's what they really love about this wonderful hobby. And that's unless we do something, of course. So that all sounds really negative, but there are some positives. There's been a real upsurge in churches and communities who, when their bells have no longer been rung, have started missing them and actually been quite visible and loud in their appreciation, particularly of the partial return of their bells in the summer. And that, is a recruitment opportunity for people when we can actually get back to ringing. The other thing that I've noticed is as new leaders have been coming to the fore, either because filling vacuums or replacing those who really do feel that they've done their bit over the years, and now would be a really good time to hand over to the next generation. So we've identified some key issues or problems, but what can we do to rebuild when it eventually resumes? Well, the first thing to say, obviously, is no one knows when and how this is going to happen in the country, mind you, for ringing. But I suppose we could say that it's unlikely to be a big bang event, and it might vary in different parts of the country, and vary as well and depend on every ringer's personal appetite for risk. So in our planning, we're assuming that it's summer, knowing that that might change. And as David said, regardless of the timing, I think we need to be ready with a plan which we can trigger whenever the time is right. I think it's better to be a little bit early and wait rather than miss the boat. We need to take into account that ringing might be different. Open practices, for example, might not be possible or encouraged, and we might be looking at closed or invited practices for a while. Interestingly, someone mentioned to me today about collecting ideas and tips for group of 6 practices, which was put on my list. Some bands might actually need to start working together in order to survive, which challenges the one band, one tower mindset, which is really prevalent in ringing, and actually which keeps people motivated and feeling part of their local community. To be honest, in the past, I would have worried about whether ringing and ringers had the capacity to deliver quickly and on the scale required in order to overcome all this. However, lots happened in the last 10 months to make me feel a bit more optimistic. The first is obviously the widespread uptake of technology that I would have thought impossible in March, and gives ringers a much wider circle of ringing friends and ways of hearing about things. So many people say, like my mum, I use Zoom now. Who would have believed that? I think the other thing that we're seeing is new tower captains and leaders emerging. One I've come across is down in Cornwall is a lady called Hayley Young, who felt during the summer that no one was doing anything. And she decided to organise a series of Sunday evening webinars and invited people like me, Simon and Will Bosworth, among others, to speak. She was quickly picked up by the Guild, and a very nice handover between the older and the younger generation took place, with relief, I think, on both sides. And now Hayley is helping the Recovery and Strategy Group in its implementation plans. Successful recovery might need us to challenge some of the accepted ways of doing things, and sometimes working harder at doing what has always been done in the past just might not work, even if people want to do even more when ringing resumes. And again, we do have to look at people's motivation. If we spent a year doing very little in the evenings, to go out 5 evenings a week teaching and ringing might not be something that people might want to revert back to. However, all of these factors, how big the challenge is, the new technologies that we're now really quite familiar with, and the emergence of new leaders mean that this could be as good a time as ever to introduce new ideas. So that's why we've set up the Survival and Recovery Group, to collect ideas and start seeding them now through a network of recovery champions, finding positive days of dealing with various problems. So I'll now talk to you a little bit about Recovery Champions. This is a new grassroots network, and I think it's got 3 major strands to it. The first is to act as a communications channel, just to tell people what's happening elsewhere. It's a way of sharing ideas so that everyone isn't reinventing the wheel when they're actually looking at developing their own local recovery plans. And they'll be helping, or maybe even leading in some places, planning for the future. So far, we've got 55 volunteers, but I think we need more. I think a lot of guilds are too big for just one recovery champion, because a recovery champion really needs to know the towers that within its own local area. And so it's our assumption that change and recovery will be delivered probably at district level, or at somewhere between 10 and 20 towers. The recovery champions at the moment, we are supported by things that David's already mentioned, the regular news sheets, and we're hoping to get the 3rd one out either tomorrow or Wednesday. A survival and recovery toolbox, which again went through a soft launch last Friday, and you'll be hearing out again this week. And a series of network meetings. The first one we had on Saturday afternoon, and we had 54 people in that meeting hearing about what was happening, and then discussing their ideas for the future. So we're talking a little bit about what sort of things might actually be in the recovery section of our strategy. I think one of the first ones is around getting fit for what I would call getting fit for ringing. I was really surprised, and I would never have thought this 6 months ago, but at a recent association meeting, the ringing master said that the 2 biggest worries for ringers were about physical fitness, of their ringing muscles, and can I actually still ring a bell? Am I going to miss a Sally? And am I going to break a stay? So having thought about this and taken, we've actually sort of got a section now and various resources around physical conditioning for ringers. So we actually approached 2 ringers who were practicing physiotherapists, and they've provided exercises for people to do at home. And that's for all of us, I think. Well, all of us on this call anyway, not just the 80-year-olds. And I was really taken, actually, but when this came out, I mean, they're very simple exercises, but you know, they're ones that you can just do as part of your daily routine. So Annie Hall, who I think some of you know, was saying that she was really taken by the fact that you could, every time you walk through a door, you put your hands up on the frame and you take a step forward, and that just increases the flexibility on your shoulders. I think the other thing to do associated with this, so that was for ringers, but more for tower captains, is to try and think of ways of providing a safe and encouraging environment for people to pick up a rope again. I think it's very easy for people to say, oh, it's just like ringing a bicycle. And once you've done it, you know, once you've got the hang of it, however long you've had off, you'll remember to do it. Well, that might work for some people, but it doesn't necessarily work for everyone. So we're looking at, for example, how to use the simulator network across the country to actually provide opportunities for people to practice with someone standing near them, but in an environment where they can't either make a fool of themselves or damage a bell or its fittings. And again, I was really surprised at how popular this could be. Within the Oxford Dyson Guild, which is my local guild, I'm on the education committee, and I think when we met in the autumn, one of the guys has got a simulator set up, and he had approached the whole of his branch and said to them, you know, if you want to practice before you do your first bit of Sunday service ringing, because that was when we were allowed to do the Sunday service ringing, then come along. And he was just, well, I was gobsmacked actually, that 25% of the branch actually went and practiced before ringing for that Sunday service. And sometimes it's just small things like that, which actually help people make the transition back into the tower. Most people would probably make that transition. It wouldn't be as nice for them, but you're stopping people having an excuse for not coming back. The other thing that we're doing in terms of getting fit for ringing is within ART ourselves, is we're looking at both online and physical teaching refresher courses. So they are particularly aimed at those who went on ART courses before lockdown, but were preventing from putting their ideas into practice. And now it could well be 18 months between the course and actually teaching their first person. But I would say that actually this is something for all of us. You know, we've not taught in a year. Okay, well over a year in quite a few cases. So let's have a little bit of a refresher there as well. Another thing that either bands or maybe districts will have to think about is replacing lost ringers and teachers. Well, I think the first part of that is don't lose your existing ringers. Okay, so, and that's the whole point of the survival strategy. It's about keeping people feel part of their band, part of the wider ringing community, and actually really enjoying ringing and understanding why. You know, they really enjoy that ringing. We're also looking at things like lockdown learners. I don't know how much ringing room you've actually done in the LDG, but there's quite a lot of learners around the country who perhaps when they went into lockdown, they could handle a bell, but they were ringing call changes or maybe just getting into plain hunt. Ringing room seems to really have worked for those people, and they've really extended their theory and method ringing well beyond their bell control. And actually they've got a lot out of that. but I think they're going to be quite disappointed when they go back into the tower, and they might very well be ringing Stedman triples or Cambridge surprise minor in ringing room, and yet they can't even ring plain hunt for a while when they go back to the tower. So what we need to be able to think about there is motivation, whether that's around goal setting, thinking about, instead of it being about method development, more around striking and performance. And one of the things we're looking at there is, could we give webinars just before people go back into the tower, aimed at both teachers and ringers, which sort of said, this is how you can help a ringer actually sort of keep themselves going, and for ringers saying, this is what it's going to be like, this is what you can do for yourselves. And again, with ringing room, I mean, don't forget to keep the positives, counting your people. You know, the number of times as a teacher when people say, when they came to a practice and say, I want to learn how to count my place, and you go, and it's like, no, that's a gradual process. You don't learn it in 5 minutes, but actually learning to count your place is just really naturally learnt in ringing room. So keep that. The listening skills that naturally come out, and things like teaching of course and after bells, which are just so obvious, I think, in ringing room, but aren't quite so easy to see on the end of a rope. So if we could go on. Oh no, I should have stayed there, but never mind. The other thing we want to think about is recruiting efficiently and effectively. So if we have done our best to keep the ringers that we actually have, then we should be looking at, there will be recruitment and retention. Recruitment issues, and things that we could do is things like the recruitment and retention workshops, which were developed by the volunteer and leadership work group, and they did 3 pilots all in the first quarter of 2020, and people really enjoyed them. People produced 10-point plans out of them. We just don't know how effective they were because before they can do anything, everything was locked down. So, but what we're thinking of is we could do some physical workshops, but probably more importantly, let's do some online workshops where we can actually introduce people to ideas, and they can look at those ideas on their own, but then have some conference calls where people from all across the country actually talk about recruitment and retention. Again, it's this concept of find out what other people have done, introduce yourself to some new ideas, and then produce a plan that's the best one for you in your own little area. And another thing to think about in here is that resource that's out there of lapse ringers. We did a survey in 2019 of lapse ringers, and I think I was amazed that we could get to so many. We got a lot of them through social media, and they were friends of existing ringers. And interestingly, over 40% of those who we contacted were able to ring surprise minor, and over 60% Grantser and plain bob. Now, the great advantage of going out and finding lapse ringers is that you don't have to do the bell handling training, and they actually can come in and be quite motivated, and because they've had a rest and they're coming back to a hobby that they really love. A lot of them have actually left not because they hated ringing, but because life got in the way. You know, they had a family, their job, you know, they had health, they might have had a health issue, they might have moved house, and they just got out of the habit of ringing. So if you can hook them and get them back into the habit of ringing, then you've got some really useful ready-made ringers out there. And we're looking at doing things differently in art. We're looking at how we need to adapt the delivery of our teaching courses, for example, so that they become a lot more COVID secure. And initially, we might need to go small and local, and actually willing to take a financial loss to do this, so that people actually learn, instead of on national courses, nationally advertised courses at least, they learn on local courses which are smaller and with the people that they already know and therefore trust and feel a lot more safe with. We are looking at new delivery mechanisms. But to be honest, it's quite hard when you're teaching a practical skill, such as bell handling. But if we can find ways of doing some of that online, then it might actually release a little bit of tutor time. We'll see how that one goes. So motivation and leadership. Well, what we need to do is, in some instance, I think, is train up some new tower captains. Training we can provide in terms of what you need to do, and I think that the Central Council in particular are looking at ways that we can do that. We're looking at if we can form a virtual tower captains network, and also looking to see whether that is better delivered centrally or amongst or by the guilds and associations. You might also want to think about ringing practices themselves. You know, perhaps this is more of a medium-term thing, but it's still very, very important. One of the things we're looking at is the Learning the Ropes scheme, which is for ringers who develop from basic their first bell handling lesson to be able to ring a quarter peal of plain bob minor inside. And instead of going down this method route, we've got over the years we've had quite a lot of feedback from bands saying actually we can only progress so far. Particularly, I think this is with bands who have bands who are all learning together, and trying to put together a call change scheme which encourages performance as well as opportunities to develop, similar to but not the same as the Devon call changes ringing that happens in the Southwest. I think the important thing as well is not to forget to build on the positive local relationships with church and community. The Cornwall example is one, but there are others out there too. I mean, Cornwall is a very interesting one in that they realised that they were pretty they were pretty short of ringers anyway before, and they realised that when they came back, the age profile was such that they weren't going to have any bands in the whole of the Lizard Peninsula. So what they're doing there, and this is what they were doing, well, they were in tier 1, weren't they, for a long time, but what they were doing there is they were talking to the church, and they got all the people who were still able to ring and wanted to ring, and talked to the church about what services they wanted to be rung at, and actually they became a peripatetic band. And they did that whilst they could. They're obviously locked down now, but they aim to start that up as soon as possible, really building up this relationship with the church. And then they've got a plan for when ringing resumes about how they're going to have a ringing centre, which is going to do all the centralised teaching, and try and start building some of those towers up again. So if we go on to the final slide, and I summarise here, I think what we've seen is both a massive shock to both ringing and to art. Art has been lucky in that it's been supported by its members who have continued to pay their membership subs. Our financial supporters have been absolutely brilliant, confirming their support. And unfortunately, we've received a fair number of donations from funerals. We've used the breathing space for art to equip itself really for the next 10 years of supporting ringing. So it was a really good breathing space for us. And it's, to be honest, we took our time to find our feet, but now we've got loads of projects going on where we can play an active and positive role in what's happening post-pandemic ringing. So thank you all for your time today. If anyone's got any questions, I'm sure David and I would be delighted to answer.
Well, Lesley, David, thank you so much indeed.